Chapter 731 Child of the Sun, Child of the Moon. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny shuddered, turning his head to the center of the Ivory City. The thunderous roar that just rolled across the flying islands chilled him to the bone, making both of his hearts stutter. The voice of Severax, the Ivory Dragon, was filled with so much sorrow, wrath, and madness that every dire horror Sunny had experienced in the Kingdom of Hope paled in comparison. It was like the voice of death itself, coming to drag them down to hell. Taking an involuntary step back, he looked at Noctis and asked hoarsely. Wasn't he supposed to be the sanest of the Chain Lords? The sorcerer slowly opened his eyes, remained motionless for a moment, and then rose to his feet. He was. Noctis glanced in the direction of the sky below, where the corpse of the Sun Prince swayed forlornly, tangled in the chains. He's not anymore, though. As all of them watched, a gargantuan silhouette rose above the city. Sun glistened on the ivory scales of the great beast, and as he moved through the sky, a deep shadow covered streets and houses. The dragon was much more beautiful, majestic, and terrifying than Sunny could have ever imagined. It radiated a feeling of power and holiness that was so intense that it reached across dozens of islands and crashed into them like a wave, making the members of the cohort pale. Severax looked more like a creature of myth than an actual monster. In fact, calling him a monster would have been unthinkable. Whatever the nightmare creatures were, he was the opposite. His mighty body, his white scales, his shining eyes, his terrible maw, all of it was suffused with profound and dreadful splendor. The whole body of the great beast was surrounded by a golden halo of divinity, which only Sunny could see. And all of that immeasurable power, all of that immolating fury, all that inhuman madness was aimed at them. Only Noctis remained indifferent, looking at the approaching dragon with a steady gaze. Sunny's face grew dark. You are going to fight, that? The sorcerer lingered for a moment, then glanced at him and smiled. He finally lost his mind. A mindless enemy is not too terrible to face. With that, Noctis took a step forward and glanced over his shoulder. He said in a wistful tone. Remember your promise, my friend. In the next moment, the figure of the sorcerer shimmered, and then disappeared, turning into a torrent of pure light. Sunny and the rest looked at the river of beautiful light that suddenly surged forward, pale under the bright radiance of the sun. All of them suddenly felt something moving in their hearts, as if they were touched by the presence of true divinity. As if they were witnessing something sacred. As the pale light rose to meet the white dragon, it flowed and swirled, shaping itself into the form of a colossal, ghostly wolf. On his forehead, a shape of a crescent moon shined radiantly. The wolf, whose body was weaved of moonlight, opened its maw and let out a deafening howl. Then, he collided with the frenzied dragon, and was obliterated. He was made out of nothing but ethereal light, after all. But although the shape of the wolf was broken, the light remained. It washed over Severax and clung to his scales, 10,000 radiant fangs sinking into them at the same time. It was as though the dragon was fighting a boundless swarm of fireflies instead of a single beast. Severax roared in pain, and then twisted his long neck. A stream of annihilating flame shot out of his maw, destroying thousands upon thousands of motes of light. Drops of sizzling blood fell to the ground from the skies. Sunny stared up, paralyzed by the mind-boggling scale and otherworldly sight of the heavenly clash. Beast of Twilight. For better or for worse, he had no time to observe the fight between descendants of the gods. In this battle, he had a role to play, too. With a sigh, Sunny turned his gaze to the beautiful Ivory City and dashed forward. He had to enter the Ivory City. In the future, the shipwreck island had been connected to the twisted rock, and then to nothing, directly bordering the rift after the small island crumbled into the sky below. However, this had not happened yet. The rift did not even exist. Instead, it bordered the Ivory City. Sunny jumped down to the heavenly chain, realizing that he had traversed this one already, once. Back then, it had been rusted and sick, being slowly devoured by chain worms. The mordant mimic had run across it, escaping the awakening wormvine while Sunny pursued. Now, the heavenly chain looked as good as new. Trying to conserve his essence, Sunny held off on turning into a shadow and simply ran forward. With his 4 cores and the augmentation of 4 shadows, his speed was nothing short of staggering, especially because he used his long upper arms to propel himself forward, as well, running more like a beast than like a human. As the 4-armed devil shot across the chain, the 2 transcendents continued their fight in the skies. He caught glimpses of it from time, or simply felt powerful shockwaves travel through the air, making his bones tremble and the heavy chain sway. The dragon was still enveloped by the swarm of light, spewing streams of fire to burn it away. The light, however, constantly moved, breaking apart and coalescing together, changing shape, and causing more and more pain to the great beast. Sometimes, the colossal form of the ghostly wolf appeared for a short moment to deliver a vicious attack, then dissolved again to avoid retaliation. It seemed as though Noctis was just one mistake away from being gravely wounded and broken by the dragon's flames, and yet, he was not making any mistakes. Fighting with a devious cunning and fierce will, the sorcerer always seemed one step ahead of Severax. But with every flash of annihilating fire, a small part of him was destroyed. Sunny did not know how much longer Noctis would be able to hold. And for that reason, his task was growing more and more pressing. He had to reach the ivory tower before one of the saints fell. Chapter 732 Severus. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. As the battle between the ivory dragon and the beast of twilight grew more and more devastating, Sunny raced across the heavenly chain and approached the walls of the ivory city. Up above, Severus and Noctis continued to rip each other apart, their fury terrible enough to shatter the sky. Effie was in no condition to fight, and Cassie had exhausted all of her soul essence. She had been battered during her escape from the falling ship, as well, so the 2 of them stayed behind, taking care of each other. There were only 2 members of their small cohort still capable of diving into the battle, Sunny and Kai. Each had their own task, and had gone their own way to complete it. From now on and maybe until the very end of the nightmare, Sunny would be on his own. Summoning the Dark Wing, he pushed his way to the top of the city wall and remained there for a moment, hiding in the shadow of a graceful guard tower. The ivory city lay beneath him, bathed in sunlight. It was as beautiful as he had remembered, even more so, up close. The graceful buildings were constructed of pristine white stone, with vibrant green vines crawling up their walls. Here and there, sparkling water murmured as it flowed through carved channels. Incredible aerial bridges and arching aqueducts connected dozens of flying islands together. Now that the sun had risen, thousands upon thousands of people poured onto the streets. All of them looked healthy and beautiful, their tan, dewy skin covered by white garments. Sunny could imagine Ilias growing up happily in this beautiful place. In this paradise built on blood. Right now, every person in the Ivory City was looking up at the sky, fear and awe mixing on their faces. With eyes burning with zeal, all of them were whispering prayers. May the sun shine upon you, Lord Severax. Bless us, Ivory Dragon. Protect us. Protect us. Their prayers rose like a sea, battering into the crazed dragon that roared in sorrow and pain as the ruthless light bit into him again and again, drawing blood and driving him even deeper into the madness. Suddenly, Sunny shivered. He remembered what Noctis had told him once about the noble, valiant, and wise Severus, the Ivory Lord. That he was both the sanest of them all, and the closest to utter madness. Severus had resisted hope longer than any other chain lord, but it was precisely for that reason that he was the most susceptible to her poison. Due to his uncompromising resilience, he had maintained most of his sanity intact, and so, had never had a chance to build up a tolerance for the insidious influence of the demon of desire over the ages. Now that the death of Sun Prince pushed him over the edge, everything that Severus had been stalwartly keeping suppressed broke out of control and flooded his mind in an instant. Hundreds of years of harrowing struggle, crashing into the bastion of his sanity all at once. Noctis had also said that the Ivory Lord both loved and hated his people. That they were a burden that weighed heavily on his soul, one which he could not escape due to his sense of duty. That they had bound the dragon to themselves with their faith, their devotion, their trust, and their dependency. Looking down, Sunny saw a wide square directly under the section of the wall he was hiding at. It was crowded with thousands of people, all staring at the sky with faith and hope shining in their eyes. Slowly, another image appeared in front of his eyes. The visage of the twisted rock as it had been in the future. All of its surface had been nothing but an uneven expanse of dark stone. That stone, however, had looked really strange. It was as if once, a long time ago, it had been melted by unimaginable heat and then solidified again, creating strange shapes and swirls. Here and there, blackened bones had protruded from the molten stone, telling the tale of countless humans and beasts who had drowned in that scorching inferno. The sight of them was eerie and disturbing, like something torn from the actual hell. He paled. Below him, the citizens of the Ivory City prayed. "Protect us! Protect us!" In the next moment, the dragon roared as he received an especially painful wound, beads of crimson blood rolling down his ivory scales. Losing the last crumbs of sense, he twisted in the air to better see his enemy, and breathed out a torrent of immolating flame. However, his enemy was too cunning. Noctis had positioned himself between the dragon and the crowded streets, hoping to use the city below as a shield, or maybe hoping to taunt Severus into destroying it. His cruel trap had worked. The stream of pale light danced out of the way of the river of fire, which fell down and engulfed the square a moment later. Sunny staggered back. In an instant, thousands of people were burned to death, their flesh turning to ash. The square became a scorching inferno, with even the stone itself melting and turning into incandescent lava. Cries of pain and horror filled the air. Some of the people survived and tried to flee, but the fire was everywhere around them. There was no escape. This was the response the Ivory Lord sent to their prayers. Horrified, Severax froze in the air and looked down, shock swirling in his radiant, bestial eyes. Sunny could practically see an internal struggle that happened in the muddled mind of the magnificent dragon. For a short moment, the light of reason grew brighter in his eyes. And then, it became fully extinguished. Not caring any more and longing for freedom, the dragon let out another furious roar, and then breathed out a powerful stream of fire, destroying a small part of the hateful enemy, but also drowning several streets of the Ivory City in flames. Sunny stared at the slaughter, petrified, but then shook his paralysis off. It did not matter how vile and tragic the fate of the Ivory Dragon, and his city, had turned out to be. All that matters was that he now had to get through the burning hell below, himself. With a low growl, Sunny summoned the memory of fire into the mantle of the underworld and jumped down. There was not much time left. Chapter 733 Inferno. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. As two immortals fought in the sky above the Ivory City, more and more of it became engulfed in fire. Driven mad by grief, pain, and the terrible weight of his endless life, the noble dragon had lost the last of his sanity. In his frenzy to destroy the elusive, hateful enemy, he brought down a deluge of immolating flame upon the beautiful city. The loss of life was tremendous. The suffering of dying people was indescribable. The heat was unbearable. Thousands died in the fire, and thousands more were being burned to ash with every minute. Panic and horror drowned the whole city, turning its citizens into a mindless mob. They tried to run, trampling countless people to death, only to be swallowed by the flame in the next second. The buildings of white stone were melting like candles, and graceful aerial bridges that connected the island were crumbling into the abyss. Suffering, death, and destruction reigned supreme. And above all of it, the ivory tower stood, sublime and heartlessly indifferent. Sunny traversed the dying city, witnessing the apocalyptic sight of its terrible demise. As he moved through the burning alleyways and streets, it seemed as though the whole world coming to the end. He was surrounded by smoke, fire, and an echoing cacophony of human screams, assaulted from all sides by the ghastly smell of burning flesh and the pervasive feeling of desperate, primal fear. The Lord of Light was the God of creation, but he was also the God of destruction. Today, this aspect of his descended upon the doomed city in all its harrowing glory. Sunny himself was one mistake away from being destroyed. He was running through the burning nightmare, sticking to shadows where he could and using smoke to hide his presence from the panicking mob. With his powerful claws and talons, it was not hard for him to scale buildings or propel himself off their walls to stay above the crowd. Reaching the edge of an island, he could use a bridge, an aqueduct, or a heavenly chain to reach the next one. Sunny was fast and powerful enough to save himself from the fires that were swiftly spreading through the Ivory City, devouring flesh and stone with equal hunger. However, nothing was going to save him if Severax unleashed a river of flame on his head. Not even the mantle of the underworld was going to survive a direct clash against the dragon's flame for more than a second. All he could rely on were his intuition and quick reaction. Reaching the edge of a large building's roof, Sunny prepared to leap over the street below, but then staggered back and dove into the shadows, appearing a dozen meters away. A split second later, a pillar of raging flame fell from above, erasing the building he was aiming for from existence, and taking the whole street with it. The roof he was standing on was cut in half, and the whole structure shuddered, starting to collapse into the sweltering inferno. The path forward was cut off by the annihilating fire, forcing him to change his course. Cursing, Sunny dashed to the side, jumped down, and glanced at the sky. Surprisingly, Noctis was still resisting the frenzied dragon. The river of light that his transformed form consisted of looked pale and weak in the overbearing radiance of the sun. The aura of terrifying might that emanated from Severax made it seem even more inadequate. The difference in power between the two was clear and immense. And yet, the beast of twilight was holding his own. Now that the Ivory Lord had succumbed to madness and abandoned all reason, he had turned into a mindless beast. A great one, but a beast nevertheless. Despite being at a tremendous disadvantage, the sorcerer was using his cunning and devious malice to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Constantly moving and shifting its form, the pale light swirled around the dragon and seeped between his scales to relentlessly bit into his flesh. Even though each wound was small and inconsequential, they brought the beast a lot of pain. From time to time, the light coalesced into the giant wolf and sank its fangs into the dragon, shattering the scales directly. Noctis was also always careful to position himself between Severax and the Ivory City, forcing the crazed Chain Lord to cause more and more destruction. The more pain Severax experienced, the more of his beloved city he destroyed, the deeper his madness and desperation grew, and the less reason remained in his damaged mind, making it easier for the ruthless sorcerer to fight him. The countless tiny wounds he delivered to the dragon were slowly starting to accumulate. However, Noctis was being damaged himself, as well. Although he was able to dodge most of the flame, each time, a small part of him was irrevocably destroyed. The light that constituted him looked much paler, already. Sunny simply could not tell who was going to win this terrible battle. He had to be prepared for both outcomes. Just as Noctis had told him, as the two clashing transcendents circled in the sky, they slowly moved toward the ivory tower. Sunny was getting closer to it, too. He had already traversed half a dozen islands, somehow managing to suffer only a couple of serious burns. Now, only a few chains separated him from the great pagoda itself. As he climbed onto the last island before the one he was aiming for, a terrible roar suddenly thundered from above, making the whole world shudder. Falling to his knees, Sunny pressed his hands against his ears and looked up, stunned. What he saw made him freeze in shock. The great dragon Severax was falling. His ivory scales were painted red, and a large chunk of flesh was missing from his neck. A river of sizzling blood was flowing from the terrible wound, and one of his mighty wings seemed to be broken. Unable to support his weight in the air, the dragon plummeted from the skies and crashed heavily into the ivory island, raising a cloud of dust and disappearing from view. Sunny swayed, then slowly stood up. See, crazy bastard, he actually did it. Noctis had won. Turning around, he searched the sky and saw the form of a ghostly wolf being engulfed in flame. The pale light was being swiftly devoured by it, and then disappeared entirely. Instead, a small human figure fell down, landing somewhere far away in the city. He knew that Noctis was still alive, the sorcerer was immortal, after all. However, Sunny doubted that he would be able to recover any time soon. It did not matter, though. Env the sorcerer had already done his part. Severax was mortally wounded, and all that remained was to thrust the knife into his flesh, making the wound actually kill him. Sunny dashed forward. The ivory tower loomed above him, obstructing the sky. He just had to reach the edge of the island and traverse one last chain to approach its foundation. The island he was currently traversing was devoid of any buildings. Instead, there was just one tall, jagged piece of white rock protruding from its center, with soot-covered chains hanging from it. Not paying it any attention, Sunny ran to the aerial bridge that led to the ivory island. As he approached it, however, he slowed down, and then stopped completely. A lone human figure was sitting on the steps leading to the bridge. The stranger was relaxed and seemingly unconcerned by the titanic battle that had just taken place. With his back turned to the ivory tower, the man was looking directly at Sunny. Waiting for him. Chapter 734 Final Obstacle. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The ivory island was separated from the rest of the city by a wide chasm. Once, it had been connected to 7 islands by 7 unbreakable chains. Now, only 2 remained. There had been several arching bridges leading to it, as well, but most of them long collapsed. Only one still stood, arching and monumental, built of pristine white stone. An old man with a wrinkled face and gray hair was sitting on the steps leading to the bridge, dressed in a white tunic. It was different from the clothes most of the citizens wore, resembling that of a priest. The man had a frail body and pale blue eyes. The old man's face was strangely calm. He observed the burning city with solemn indifference, as if the weight of years made him numb to the cruelties of the mortal realm. Even though his world was ending, the elder remained poised and dignified. Noticing the approaching devil, the old man tiredly leaned on his cane. "Stop, creature. This is a sacred land, you are not allowed to go further." Sunny stopped a few meters away from the stranger and studied him for a few moments. Then, he sighed and said, his voice even. "Why the charade? Drop it, Mordred." The old man looked at him with confusion, then suddenly grinned. His whole presence suddenly shifted, becoming much more energetic and unrestrained. He laughed dryly, and then shook his head. "Ah, what a pity. What gave me away?" Sunny shrugged. "I knew that you would show up sooner or later. And there's not much of later left." Mordred, who inhabited the old and frail body, smiled. "True, true. Thank you very much, Sunless. You have fulfilled my request to keep Noctis alive very well. In fact..." His face darkened a little. "I'd say that you even performed a little bit too well. Who could have thought that the Beast of Twilight would still win, despite not having the Night Oracle's support? It makes me feel as though all my ordeals in the north were a bit silly." The old man sighed, but then smiled again. "Well, no matter. It can still be salvaged. However, I was very serious. Sorry to say this, but you can't go any further, Sunless." Sunny tilted his head a little, staring at Mordred with a dark expression. "Oh, yeah. How are you going to kill that damn dragon without my knife? I am sure you know that I visited the Temple of the Chalice." The old man gave him a polite nod. "Oh, I do. That was rather spectacular. But, Sunless, you see, that is exactly why I can't allow you to cross that bridge." Sunny frowned. "What do you mean? Why?" Mordred looked at him with surprise. Well, because I need Severus alive, of course. Killing him would ruin months of torturous effort I put into preparing everything. Remaining in this feeble body all that time was not very pleasant, you know, but there are very few people that the Ivory Lord allows to tend to him, and this priest was the best choice. Sonny gritted his teeth, then uttered with frustration. Keep Noctis alive, keep Severus alive, damn it. What the hell do you actually hope to achieve, Mordred? You are clearly not planning to free Hope. What else can end this nightmare? What do you want? The old man blinked a couple of times, confusion appearing on his face. Free Hope. He thought for a moment, then shook his head with a smile. Of course, I am not here to free Hope. That is not the reason why I entered this seed. His smile twisted slightly, a disturbing glint igniting in his eyes. I am here to kill her. As the words echoed in the silence, Sonny stared at the frail old man with a deep frown. Then, he threw his head back and laughed. Kill her, kill Hope. Have you completely lost your mind, Mordred? The banished prince shifted slightly, then said in a neutral tone. Not completely. Sonny clenched his fists, then shook his head in indignation. She is a demon, you fool. A divine being. A god. How are you, a mere awakened, going to kill her? How can you hope to even scratch her? Mordred shrugged, then looked at him with a friendly smile. Why? Have you never wanted to kill a god? Sonny stared at him with wide eyes. I am of a rather high opinion of myself, but I am not delusional. I know my limits, Mordred, don't you? The old man sighed. It's not like killing a god is impossible. They are all dead, after all. However, I understand your concern. I would not have wanted to face the demon of desire in battle. He lingered for a moment, and then added. But she is not exactly able to fight right now, is she? She is bound, sapped of most of her powers. Imprisoned for 1,000 years, so, you see, I can't let you go breaking more of her chains. Your part is done, Sunless. Leave the rest to me. I will conquer this nightmare for both of us. Well. And reap the reward, of course. Sonny bared his fangs. She might not be as powerful as she had been before Sun God put her in chains, but she is still a creature of divine rank. Your power alone will not be enough to wound her, let alone kill her. You are insane. Hope's poison must have gotten to you. Mordred smiled. Ah, you are correct. I am not powerful enough to kill her alone. That is why I have spent months carefully putting a few useful ideas into the Ivory Lord's muddled mind. I needed Noctis to give him a little push, though, kill his brother, destroy his city. You did well to assist him. A dangerous gleam appeared in the old man's eyes. Now that Severus has nothing left, he will direct his endless ire on Hope. That will be my chance. So, Sunless. I would advise you to stand down. If you truly know your limits, you won't stand in my way. Sonny stared at Mordred for a few moments, his eyes growing darker and darker. A tense silence settled between the two of them. Then, a swirl of sparks appeared around the devil's hand. The old man looked at it, his gaze growing sharp and cold. He was waiting to see what weapon Sonny was going to summon. However, Sonny did not summon a weapon. Instead, an exquisite wooden chair appeared in his hand. Glaring at Mordred, Sonny put the chair on the ground, sat on it, and crossed his arms. Well, go on, then. What are you waiting for? I wish you luck. Chapter 735 Settling Debts. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sonny sat comfortably on the elegant wooden chair, staring at Mordred with all four of his arms crossed. The chair was a bit small for his prodigious body, but due to the quality and durability of the materials it was made of, managed to carry the weight rather well. Noctis really knew the value of good craftsmanship. The old man, meanwhile, met his deadpan gaze with a mildly surprised expression slowly appearing on his face. All around them, the Ivory City was being devoured by fire. After a while, Mordred shifted a little, and then said with amusement. To be honest, I expected you to attack me. Sunny scoffed. Why would I bother? You seem to be hellbent on committing suicide. I can just wait until hope kills you, then carry on with my initial plans. He thought for a bit, and then added. Plus, in the improbable case that you somehow succeed, I don't really lose anything. I will still become a master. Sure, the great and mighty clan Valor might suffer as the result, but what do I care? I have no relationship with them. The old man glanced at him with a pleasant smile. That bow of yours suggests otherwise. Sunny chuckled. My war bow. Do you like it? Well, I like it very much. What a beauty, your family really knows how to craft a memory. However, you are mistaken if you think that I received it for rendering some service to Valor or being close to your father. In fact, they don't even know that I have it. I would prefer if it stayed that way, too. Mordred tilted his head a little. Have no worry, Sunless. Your secret is safe with me. All your secrets, actually. I have to admit, though, with how paranoid you are, I thought that you would try to silence me at all costs. Aren't you afraid that I will reveal them after escaping from the nightmare? Sunny smiled lazily, then shrugged. Not really. He sighed, and then said in a serious tone. While it pains me that you know so much about me, you and I are similar in many ways. We both believe that knowledge is the origin of power, don't we? So, sharing my secrets would be no different from giving your power away. Why share the leverage you have on me with anyone when you can have it all to yourself? Sunny's expression grew a little dour. Of course, I would gladly kill you to destroy that leverage. However, the benefit of destroying you is not worth the risk of fighting you. You are one scary bastard, Mordred, you know that. Plus, I don't even know how to kill you, so what's the point? He was not lying. Although Sunny had grown more powerful than he had expected inside the nightmare, Mordred was much older and had vastly more experience. He also had a far greater background. If Sunny's suspicions were correct, not only had the Prince of Nothing inherited the lineage of War God, but he had also been raised by both great clan Valor and Nestirian. He was a monster created by not one, but two sovereigns. A monster capable enough to, maybe, outshine both of them. How could an outskirt rat like Sunny compete with that upbringing? He couldn't. Yet. At least not in a direct fight. A competition of wit, on the other hand. Who could say which one of them was more devious? As Sunny stared at him with a smile, Mordred remained silent for a few moments, and then slowly stood up. What remarkable restraint, are you sure you don't want to attack me, Sunless? Sunny shook his head. I really don't want to. The old man looked at him, then said with uncertainty. Well. I'll be going then. He lingered for a few moments before turning around and taking a step away. Sunny cleared his throat. There is one problem, though. Mordred froze, then faced him again, an amused smile appearing on his lips. His eyes glistened dangerously. Oh. Sunny sighed. As much as I don't want to fight you, and as much as I wish you luck in ending this nightmare. I am a very, very petty person. I also have a great memory. I tend to remember my grudges. He raised a hand and started counting on his fingers. You used me, lured me into a trap, put me in hot water with clan Valor, caused me and my friend weeks of terrible suffering, almost cost us our lives, and then even tried to kill me yourself. You really, really owe me a lot, Mordred, don't you think? The old man grinned. Ah, I see how you could have been a little upset with my actions. Well, how do you suppose we should settle my debt, Sunless? Sunny made himself more comfortable and smiled. Then, he said in a cheerful tone. That I accept transcendent memories. 6 or 7 should do. Mordred stared at him for a bit, then laughed. I see. Sadly, that would not be very convenient for me. Anything else you might consider? Sunny looked at him with regret. Well, in that case, there is one other thing. I guess I can just prevent you from killing Hope, ruin the plans you've been making for the better part of the decade, torture you ruthlessly for a few weeks, and then slowly destroy your body. That should make us even, I think. Mordred looked at him with a somber expression. That I thought you couldn't lie. Didn't you say that you wouldn't attack me? Sunny shook his head. I said that I don't want to attack you. Never said that I won't, Noel done, and the old man sighed. Yes, I noticed. Pity. I hope to avoid this. With that, the shadows around Sunny suddenly shifted and moved. A moment later, 5 identical four-armed devils rose from them, each at least 3 meters tall. They wore fearsome onyx armors, with darkness veiling their bestial faces and black eyes. Each had 4 horns, and each had one of them broken. The devils radiated a suffocating, frightening feeling of malice and furious power. Still sitting on his chair, Sunny stared at the 5 shadow spawns that surrounded him with trepidation. His face grew still. Gripping the extraordinary rock, he shivered and said glumly. Well, that's not good at all. Chapter 736 Surrounded. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. 5 reflections surrounded Sunny, each bearing his own image. The towering Shadowkin devils looked nothing short of terrifying. Their gaunt, ironclad figures emanated a feeling of profound threat and malice, and their black eyes peered at him with inhuman intensity. It was deeply disturbing. Damn. Am I that scary? Sunny leaned on the backrest of his chair and said without skipping a pause. Lost from light, kill that wicked old man. The reflections continued to stare at him, unmoving. A few moments passed, but nothing happened. An awkward silence hung in the air. Mordred chuckled. You didn't really think that this trick would work again, did you? He smiled, then glanced at the shadow devils with satisfaction. Naturally, I bound them to myself before you arrived. Sunny glared at the old man for a bit, then looked away and shrugged. Well, it was worth a try, anyway. Disappointing. He studied the reflections for a second, trying to determine how powerful they were, exactly. Unlike how Mordred had appeared during their soul battle, now, Sunny could only see one weak core in the frail body of the old man. It was dim and unremarkable, hinting that he was looking at the priest's own soul, or at least its perfect imitation. It seemed that determining which body the Prince of Nothing possessed in that manner was impossible. His own soul was perfectly hidden. The reflections, on the other hand, were different, and quite bizarre. Sunny could see shadow cores inside each of the creatures, but despite looking like shadow devils, none of them were. All of them were ascended, but 2 out of 5 were mere beasts. 2 more were monsters, and 1 was a demon. Sunny had no idea how the class progression worked when it came to reflections, but he suspected that they were less powerful than the Mirror Beast, their elder sibling, had been. Mirror Beast had lived a much longer life and risen to an ascended devil, after all. Still, 5 ascended reflections were most likely more than enough to rip him to shreds. Especially considering that each of them was reflecting a wielder of a divine aspect. Sunny looked at Mordred, hesitated, and said somberly. Very impressive, but also a bit underwhelming. I guess slaughtering thousands of mundane humans was not very nourishing for your monsters, huh? Now that I see them, I do agree that your accomplishments in the north might have been silly. The old man looked at him with a dark expression. There's still enough to kill you, Bedodem. Sunny grinned. Oh, let's not. You are not going to kill me. Mordred raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? Sitting comfortably on his chair, Sunny shrugged. What's the point? I am more useful to you alive. Plus, if you get rid of me, you can say goodbye to all the wonderful memories I possess. I would have been a bit scared if you had weeks to torture me into surrendering them, but you don't. The old man smiled. This is a very reasonable answer. However, are you that sure I am a reasonable man, Sunless? Sunny felt a cold shiver run down his spine and forced out a weak smile. Ah, no. Not really. I am not sure. In any case, you are also underestimating me. Mordred frowned. How so? Your allies seem to have abandoned you. Your shadows are wounded and can't be summoned again. What can you do against reflections? Glancing at the towering shadow devils with apprehension, Sunny lingered for a few moments and then said. Well, if you put it like that, it does seem like I can't do much. They are all very powerful, indeed. I am already a bit of a menace, and these things possess all of my powers, wielding them with the might of Ascendids no less. However. He shifted his gaze to the old man, a wicked smile appearing on his lips. The same can't be said about you, can it? You sacrificed all your cores to create these reflections. By now, you could have succeeded in creating one, maybe two. That still makes you weaker than me. More than that, I couldn't help to notice that your aspect, terrifying as it might be, doesn't offer you any direct combat augmentations. It's all pure utility. So, while I can't kill your monsters. His eyes grew darker, suffused with a dangerous glow. That I probably stand a good chance of destroying your body before they can stop me. His 4 shadows were wrapped around his body, filling it with explosive might. There were just a few meters separating him from the frail old man, he could breach that distance in an instant. Mordred opened his eyes wide, took a shaky step back, and raised his hands to protect himself. Oh, no. Please, don't. What would I do without a body? Then, he shook his head and laughed. It's not like there's a whole city full of people I can take, right? Come to think of it, maybe I'll travel outside the city, find one of your allies, and wear them instead. Which one should I pick, huh? The child or the cripple? I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and deal with that infuriating oracle of yours at the same time. That is a great idea, don't you think? Sunny grew quiet. No, I don't think that it's a great idea. The old man looked at him darkly, then shook his head and turned around. I suggest that you don't move, Sunless. My reflections won't kill you, but that doesn't mean that they will be gentle. Pain is pain. With that, he started climbing the steps leading to the bridge. Sunny stared at his back, gritting his teeth, then summoned the dying wish. As soon as the charm weaved itself and merged with the mantle of the underworld, he sent all 4 of his shadows to wrap themselves around the onyx armor, thus augmenting its underworld armament, enchantment 4 times over. Already strengthened by it, the effect of the dying wish became tremendously enhanced. Memory enchantments. Death wish. Enchantment description. Those who witness the wielder of this memory are compelled, friends to be inspired, foes to seek the wielder out. Already a few steps away, Mordred suddenly slowed down, swayed a little, and then turned around. His face was tense and full of fury. Arg, what? He stared at Sunny with madness and bloodlust in his eyes, then grimaced. What a vile memory. Nice trick, Sunless. But it won't work on me. The old man smiled then disdain, then suddenly froze. Slowly, a deep scowl appeared on his face. But why would you want me to attack, Sunless? That doesn't make any sense, you know how dangerous I am. Unless, of course. His eyes widened. At the same time, Sunny grinned. And far away from them, across the vast expanse of emptiness leading to the Ivory Island, a small figure appeared from the darkness of the sky below, flying swiftly toward the bleeding dragon. Chapter 737 Self-Reflection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Sylvain and Sun Prince had been defeated and the light of dawn washed over the shattered remains of the Kingdom of Hope, bringing with it the frenzied fury of the Ivory Dragon, Sunny knew that Severax would not be the only obstacle in their way. Throughout all of it, he had never forgotten about Mordred. In truth, he was warier of the banished Prince of Valor than he was of the immortal saints, no matter how powerful and dreadful they were. The full force of a great clan had failed to contain the Prince of Nothing. So what hope did Sunny have? Of course, he was not sure that Mordred would end up as their adversary in this nightmare. They were allies during this hellish trial, after all, at least in theory. But he could not discount the possibility. The advice Master Jet had given Sunny before he ventured into the seed stuck with him. Most of the hard-won wisdom she had shared in the past ended up being instrumental to his survival, so he made sure to remember her words. For that reason, Sunny and Kai agreed on a very simple plan. One of them took the obsidian knife, and the other took the glass knife. Depending on which of the immortals fell, one man was going to finish the job, while the other was going to prevent the Prince of Nothing from intervening, in case the need to do so arose. As the saying went, it was unwise to put all your eggs in one basket. The type of egg Sunny had the most experience with had belonged to a great devil, so he was not quite sure why exactly keeping eggs in a basket was so detrimental. But he did agree with the general idea. And so, from the moment the frail old man appeared in his view, Sunny had pursued a single goal. BDNVL. He had to keep the attention of Mordred and all 5 of his reflections on himself. Even though there was a small possibility that he could emerge victorious if the 2 of them clashed in earnest, Sunny did not consider his chances of defeating the banished prince in battle high, especially not while being exhausted after the furious assault on the flying fleet and devoid of the support of his shadows. He had never intended to actually fight the Mordred. All he wanted to do was to stall him. For that reason, Sunny engaged Mordred in a lengthy conversation, created the false perception that he was still in possession of the glass knife by asking a few misleading questions, and provoked his opponent into revealing the 5 reflections. Perhaps the Prince of Nothing was poisoned by hope enough to lose a small part of his cunning, or perhaps he fell for the trap that awaited most habitual liars and failed to account for how warped his impression of people was. Perhaps he underestimated how proficient Sunny grew in utilizing his flaw for his own benefit. In any case, for once, Mordred ended up as the one being manipulated instead of the one pulling the strings. Sunny might have not been stronger than him, but he did manage to outwit the banished prince. Today, he turned out to be the more devious of the 2, even if just barely. He won the fight without lifting a finger, using only a wooden chair and his devilish tongue. Well, to be precise, he did not even use his tongue. He used a rock instead. As soon as all reflections revealed themselves, Kai started to move. And by the time he reached the Ivory Island, it was already too late to stop him. Almost. The Prince of Nothing still could have used his aspect to move through the reflections and invade the archer's soul. However, Kai was wearing the anvil amulet that Sunny had given him. This talisman had been forged by the Sovereign of Valor himself, and made the wearer immune to Mordred's soul possession. Even if the banished prince jumped through the reflections into Kai's eyes, he was not going to be able to possess him. That left only the reflections, which were currently turned into copies of Sunny and wielded his divine aspect. Each had access to the memories he wore and his aspect abilities, including Shadow Step. They could still reach the island in time to prevent Kai from delivering the killing blow to Severax. Sunny had to stop them at all costs and buy his friend a few precious seconds. But that was easier said than done. As a small human figure streaked from the darkness of the sky below toward the slumped silhouette of the Ivory Dragon, Mordred swiftly turned and narrowed his eyes, instantly realizing that he had been played. Before he could react, however, a tide of shadows suddenly exploded from the small lantern hanging on Sunny's waist, enveloping everything around them in impenetrable darkness. The light of the sun was swiftly destroying the shadows, but at the same time, it was being devoured by the lantern, creating a strange equilibrium. The shadows themselves were ancient, deep, and resilient. Sunny had collected them from the dark sides of the island surrounding the sanctuary before departing for the war. With no light remaining around them, there were also no reflections. With no reflections, Mordred was robbed of a large part of his power for a moment. That did not help at all against the 5 reflections, though, since each of them was as comfortable in the shadows as Sunny himself was. They were his perfect copies, after all. Knowing that, Sunny decided to try a desperate gamble. The mantle of the underworld was still augmented by 4 shadows, its underworld armament, enchantment empowering the dying wishes effect manifold. Sunny himself was strongly affected by the compelling aura of the charm, feeling an almost irresistible urge to throw himself at the reflections and tear them apart. However, this sensation was swiftly disappearing, since he had already dismissed the iron statuette. Instead, he summoned the broken oath into the onyx armor. And since the 5 reflections were mirroring him, each of them reflected that change, too. Only the demon turned out to be smart enough to stop himself and consider the consequences. The beasts and monsters failed to realize the result of their actions in time. Mordred moved, and so did the shadow devils. But just as they did, the vile charm fully weaved itself into existence. Augmented by the enchantment of the mantle of the underworld, its soul-eroding aura was strengthened and flowed outward like invisible poison. The armor, however, was itself augmented 4 times over by Sunny's shadows, making the empowering effect tremendously more pronounced. And on top of that, 4 out of the 5 reflections suddenly emanated the same ferocious aura. The 5 overcharged fields of soul erosion merged together, turning into something far more vicious and destructive than the sum of its parts. Into something truly horrid. Even though the mantle of the underworld provided Sunny with a substantial degree of resistance against soul attacks, he couldn't help but let out a scream. The reflections opened their mouths in agony, too, although no sound came out of them. Mordred, however. Mordred did not enjoy the same protection that Sunny and the reflections received from the onyx armor. Chapter 738 Soul Annihilation. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The underworld armament allowed the mantle to accommodate and augment a charm memory, channeling its enchantment as if it was inherent to the armor itself. That alone made the mantle of the underworld incredibly flexible. What was more, this quality truly shined when wielded by Sunny. He could have augmented the broken oath with his 4 shadows, but chose to wrap them around his armor instead, achieving an even better result. Not only was the effect of the augmentation shared and enhanced, but all the other enchantments of the mantle of the underworld were augmented as well. Among them was Stalwart, which granted him extremely high protection against physical attacks, high protection against elemental attacks, and, most importantly, a moderate amount of protection against mind and soul attacks. Currently, the mantle was simultaneously radiating a tremendously damaging soul annihilation aura and providing him with vastly increased resistance to soul damage. Even then, when 5 of these auras clashed and combined together, he let out a scream and collapsed to the ground, consumed by harrowing agony. His already wounded soul was being frayed and eroded at a terrible rate, and all he could do was writhe on the ground, barely clinging to any resemblance of consciousness. The 5 reflections were not doing much better. Even though their ascended souls, or whatever it was they had instead of souls, possessed a far better quality due to a superior rank, they had fewer cores. While that was not enough to make them succumb to soul annihilation faster than Sunny by itself, that also meant that they had fewer shadows, and therefore their reflected versions of the mantle enjoyed less augmentation, providing them with less resistance to soul damage. What it all meant, Sunny had no idea. He could not guess who was going to be destroyed first, the reflections or him. As far as he could tell, their chances were about equal. However, things were very different when it came to Mordred. Unlike Sunny and the reflections, he did not enjoy the protection of the mantle of the underworld. He was also only able to steal the aspect of the body he possessed, while his own strange and terrible ability to mirror someone's powers only worked inside the victim's soul. He could not simply copy the onyx armor onto himself, nor could he augment it. For the moment, Mordred was defenseless. With a startled yelp, the old man awkwardly fell to his knees and then rolled down the steps, ending up on the ground not too far away from Sunny. A stifled howl escaped from his lips and his eyes opened wide, full of shock and terrible pain. The suffering Sunny and the reflections experienced affected him so much worse. Any other awakened would have been swiftly destroyed, but the Prince of Nothing persisted, somehow. Several swirls of sparks instantly appeared around his body, heralding the appearance of protective memories. Who knew how vast and powerful his soul arsenal was? Mordred could have possessed a memory capable of turning the tide of events completely. But very few memories were capable of manifesting themselves instantly. Most took several precious seconds to appear, and usually, the more powerful ones took the longest. By the time the sparks of light turned into tangible objects, he could have been either already dead or too severely damaged to be able to act. Writhing in agony, Sunny threw a burning look at the old man and gritted his teeth so hard that his fangs pierced his lip, sending drops of blood rolling down. Die. Die, you bastard. Just hurry up and die. A desperate hope that Mordred would fail to survive the soul annihilation filled his hearts, despite the fact that Sunny did not really think that getting rid of the prince would be so easy. He seriously doubted that Mordred would allow himself to be killed in this fashion. Not to mention that as far as he knew, the Prince of Nothing was as immortal as the cursed transcendence of the Kingdom of Hope. Both his physical and spirit bodies had been destroyed in the past, but that did not stop Mordred from continuing to exist, somehow. The great clan Valor certainly did not lack means of dealing soul damage, but they had failed to get rid of his reflection. I don't care. Just die. Sunny would have been satisfied with just destroying Mordred's mortal shell, anyway. His true task was to buy Kai enough time to kill the ivory dragon, and forcing the prince to search for another body would do just that. Sadly, Mordred had the same idea. If he had lost all reason because of the pain, things could have turned differently, but the Prince of Nothing was nothing if not cool-headed and calculating. Despite the terrible suffering of having his soul slowly torn to pieces, he kept some of his composure and ability to think intact. Twisting, Mordred struggled to raise his head and looked in the direction of one of the reflections. The shadow spawn was on his knees, his bestial face contorted by a grimace of agony. The Prince of Nothing paled, and then whispered something. A moment later, the figure of the kneeling devil rippled and shattered like a piece of glass. Something swift and intangible moved through the air and entered Mordred's body. Then, another reflection shattered. And then another, and then another. In an instant, 4 of the 5, both beasts and both monsters, were gone, leaving a lone demon behind. As they disappeared, the components of the soul-annihilating field disappeared as well. Only Sunny's own augmented aura was left to spread the invisible poison. He let out a trembling sigh of relief, and then dismissed the broken oath entirely. Almost at the same time, a silver bracelet, a necklace made of strange black pearls, and a bone scepter appeared on Mordred's body and in his hand. Each of the memories, without a doubt, provided him with a degree of soul protection, but by now, they were of no use. With his soul in shambles and barely keeping itself together, Sunny remained laying on the ground. He groaned, and then threw a tired glance at his enemy. The flood of soul essence he was sending into the shadow lantern had run dry, and the sunlight finally prevailed, dismantling the dome of shadows that surrounded them. Mordred looked different, somehow. The old man's body remained the same, but now, a subtle sensation of immense, turbulent power emanated from it. As if Sunny was facing a titan instead of a man. No way, could it be? 2 monsters and 2 beasts, between the 4 of them, they had shared 6 soul cores. Had Mordred not dismissed the reflections, but actually absorbed them in order to strengthen his soul and survive the powerful attack? How did it even work? How could an awakened absorb ascended cores? Would they weaken, or would all that excess power rip his soul to shreds from the inside? Sunny did not know. All he knew was that he was utterly beaten and spent, and there was an ascended demon and an awakened titan in the guise of an old man in front of him, wrath burning in their eyes. But that did not matter. Because at that moment, an inhuman, pained cry rolled across the empty expanse of the empty void and reached their ears. It was the voice of the ivory dragon, Severax. His dying breath. Chapter 739 Empty Skies. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. While Sunny and Mordred struggled to survive as their souls were being destroyed, a human figure emerged from the darkness of the sky below and shot into the sunlight, flying with incredible speed. It was a man with skin that looked like polished bark and a burned, disfigured face. His armor was battered and painted dull by dried blood, and the quiver attached to his belt was long empty. The man had been an officer of the Sun Legion once, but now, he returned to kill its commander. His eyes were full of resolve. Months had passed since the terrible day when Kai and his most brave soldiers were chained to the white cliff on the Sacrifice Island and left there to be devoured by the ivory dragon. Who could have thought that he would be back to this cursed place so soon? Leaving the heat of the burning city behind, Kai had hidden himself under the island where his comrades were turned to ash by the dragon's flame, waited for Sunny to get the full attention of the Prince of Valor, and then dashed forward without looking back. He did not wish to see the white cliff and the soot-covered chains hanging from its surface ever again. Flying under the last bridge connecting the rest of the city to the Ivory Island, he avoided being noticed too soon, and then ascended into the sunlight. Behind him, a dome of shadows suddenly appeared at the entrance to the bridge, hiding his friend from sight. With his heart growing heavy, Kai soared above the emerald grass of the Ivory City and finally saw his goal. A magnificent dragon was laying on the ground, blood streaming from his mangled neck. His white scales were painted crimson, and one of his wings was broken. But the great beast was still alive. He was still breathing. He was immortal, after all. But not for long. In his hand, Kai held a knife made of ghostly glass. Inside the knife, the dragon's fate was sealed, placed there by a ruthless god. Was Kai breaking the will of the gods by delivering it back to its owner? Or completing their design? He did not know, and he did not care. All he cared about was killing the dragon. Kai had never been very strong, or very brave, or very smart. It took him a long time to grow a little. He was not a person of great conviction, either. But if there was one thing he believed, it was that Severax had to die, and that his ghastly reign had to end. The beautiful city he ruled was just too vile. Gritting his teeth, Kai ignored the pain that had tormented him for months and lunged at the gargantuan form of the dragon. The glass knife glistened in his hand. But even terribly wounded, the immortal transcendent was still immensely powerful and deadly. How could a mere awakened ever hope to wound him? Before Kai could thrust the ghostly blade into the exposed flesh on the great beast's neck, Severax suddenly stirred. His eyelids flew up, revealing inhuman amber eyes. His maw opened slightly, wisps of smoke escaping it. The dragon moved his healthy wing, and a torrent of wind crashed into Kai, sending him spinning. The glass knife scratched uselessly against impenetrable scales, and he was thrown away. A moment later, a giant claw brushed across his chest. The young man dashed away in time to avoid being killed, but just this light touch was enough to rip his breastplate open and shatter a few of his ribs. With a groan, Kai fell on the soft grass. His speed was so great that his body slid for a few dozen meters, and by the time he rose shakily to his knees, the dragon was already looking at him, ready to attack. A hint of confusion surfaced from the ocean of madness hidden in his eyes. Severax lingered for a moment, and then, a low, tired, sonorous voice resounded from all around them. "You. I know you." Kai gritted his teeth. His surprise attack had failed, he failed. Now that the Transcendent was aware of him, there was little chance of delivering the fateful strike. No matter how wounded and exhausted the Ivory Lord was, he would still be immeasurably faster, stronger, and more powerful than an awakened with a weak aspect. He would crush Kai in an instant. The immortal was not going to die. Hope was not going to escape. The nightmare was not going to end. His friends would not be saved. Kai might have been able to fly through the sky and see far and wide. But he was no dragon. The man with a disfigured face looked at the immortal beast towering in front of him. He shook slightly, and then lowered his head, and then, he lunged forward, sending bits of torn grass into the air. He was fast, incredibly fast, but Severax was faster. The great beast twisted his neck, protecting the wound left on it by the fangs of the beast of twilight, and then opened his maw to crush the small human between his jaws. Perhaps Kai could have dodged. But he didn't. Instead, he accelerated even more and flew straight into the dragon's maw, which instantly closed, giant fangs striking against each other with a deafening sound. Just like that, the crippled man was gone. The dragon froze for a moment, stunned by the little human's unflinching bravery. Then, he suddenly shuddered and let out a tortured cry. Kai, who had plunged the glass knife into the soft flesh of the great beast's tongue, was thrown back and crashed heavily onto the ground. His bark-like skin was smoldering, scorched once again by the heat of the dragon's flame. His armor was disintegrating. And the Ivory Lord, meanwhile, was becoming mortal again. Now that his fate had been returned to him, the terrible wound on his neck was sapping him of life. A few seconds more, and it was going to kill him. But no, not yet. As a long, sorrowful cry of the great beast echoed across the burning city, Severus stubbornly refused to die. Straining his battered body, he slowly crawled forward, desperately trying to reach the ivory tower, which he had sworn to protect. Leaving a trail of blood behind, the beautiful white dragon tortuously wrapped his body around the great pagoda and tiredly lowered his head to the ground in front of its gates. His eyes slowly closed. It was his duty to protect it. He was going to it, even in death. He promised. Laying on the soft grass in the middle of a burning inferno, the dragon let out a soft breath. He imagined a different picture. A picture of a beautiful white city, its streets bathing in gentle sunlight. Full of happy and kind people. Thriving, peaceful, and safe. A few moments later, Severus, the blessed of the sun, was dead. Chapter 740 Dream is collapsing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the ivory dragon died, an invisible ripple spread through the world. The whole city trembled slightly, and then, one of the two remaining chains that bound the ivory island to the rest of Hope's shattered kingdom broke with a deafening ring. The broken chain fell into the darkness of the sky below, leaving only a single tether holding the island in place. The island's position shifted, not by much, but enough to cause the arching stone bridge to crack, shudder, and then slowly crumble. A cloud of stone dust rose into the air as the massive structure collapsed, enveloping the patch of grass where Sunny and Mordred lay, still reeling from the deadly soul attack. Sunny coughed and waved his hand in front of his face, weakly trying to chase the dust away. Damnation! The Prince of Nothing, meanwhile, was slowly rising to his feet. With a stagger, he regained his footing and looked in the direction of the ivory tower, his old face growing dim. Mordred remained silent for a while, and then said evenly. Well, that is a bit unfortunate. Sunny let out a hoarse laugh, causing the old man to turn around and glance at him darkly. Then, he tried to sit up, but failed. The Prince of Nothing scoffed. Drop the act, Sunless. I know you are not that weakened. Sunny cursed, then stopped pretending and sat up with a groan. He was indeed in a very bad shape, drained of essence, and barely alive because of how severely damaged his soul was. However, he was indeed not as weak as he had wanted to mislead Mordred into believing. The old man shook his head, then smiled. Using my own reflections against me, how clever. I expected something like that from you. Then, his face abruptly grew dark, and he gazed in the direction of the ivory tower once again. His voice sounded quiet and uncertain. That, however, that I did not expect at all. It should not have been possible. I don't understand, giving one of the knives away is not in your nature. With how cynical and distrustful you are, you should have clung to them to the end. How did I make this mistake? Sonny grinned. I guess I've changed. Mordred frowned, then slowly shook his head. People don't change that easily. The grin on Sonny's face became a little brittle. Thought it wasn't easy. The old man remained motionless for a while, then sighed heavily and turned around to face him. At the same time, his remaining reflection did the same. The Prince of Nothing stared at the battered shadow devil for a few moments, then said amiably. Sunless, my friend, please give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you. Sonny blinked a couple of times, then answered with a dark smile. In case you didn't notice, people who try to kill me tend to end up dead instead. Mordred grinned dangerously. I am sure I can manage. Well, crap. I'm a bit sure myself. He tilted his head, then said doubtfully. Because I still have the divine memory you want to get your hands on. The old man took a step forward, causing the reflection to do the same. Normally, that would have been a good reason. But right now, to be honest, Sunless, I am starting to wonder if it's worth the effort. Sonny lingered for a bit, then raised an eyebrow. Pretty please. The Prince of Nothing laughed. Not good enough. Sonny stared at him, slowly circulating what little essence he had left through his body. His shadows were damaged and restoring themselves in the nurturing black flames of his soul, his strength was depleted, his allies were far away and in even worse shape than him. Things were looking bleak. He sighed, and then said in a neutral tone. Look, sure, you can probably kill me. But make no mistake, I won't make it easy for you. More importantly, I'll make sure to resist for a long, long time. Mordred smiled politely. So far, I am liking everything that I am hearing. Sonny grinned. Aren't you forgetting something? The Prince of Nothing lingered for a moment, then frowned. And what might that be? Climbing back onto his chair, Sonny leaned on the backrest and let out a relieved sigh. Then, he pointed at the ivory tower. This nightmare is coming to the end. There's not much time left until we are returned to the real world. Precious time that you are going to waste trying to get rid of me. Mordred looked at him with a dark expression. That is all right. My schedule is suddenly free, anyway. What else is there to do? Sonny shook his head. You might have lost the opportunity to kill the demon of desire. But have you forgotten about the demon of destiny? There is a whole ebony tower beneath us, free for the plunder. The old man's frown deepened. The divine flames are much more intense and plentiful during this time. The rift in them can't be traversed by the likes of us. Not that there's enough time to, anyway. Unless. His expression suddenly changed. Sonny nodded. Indeed. The sky below cannot be traversed, but we just happen to be near the Ivory Island, and the portal that stands behind the tower. Now, you can waste time trying to kill me, or you can try to pour enough divine flame into it, and get your hands on all the toys left behind by Nether. Just don't be an idiot like me and let the time catch up to them after the seal is broken. Mordred stared at him for a few moments, and then grinned. You are just hoping that the strange rot inside the ebony tower is going to devour me, aren't you? After all, it is not as starved yet, in this time. Sonny coughed. Guilty as charged. Still. Are you planning to kill a sovereign without taking a risk from time to time? Hurry up and decide. The clock is ticking. The old man studied him for a while, not saying anything. Gradually, Sonny grew extremely uncomfortable under that gaze. Damned bastard, your desire to kill me can't be stronger than your desire to take revenge on Clan Valor. Hope, do your thing. Come on. Eventually, Mordred chuckled, shook his head, and said. 2 sovereigns. Sonny raised an eyebrow. What? The old man turned around and headed to the edge of the island, followed by his reflection. 2 sovereigns. I plan to kill Asterion, too. Although that will probably be much, much harder than dealing with my father, still, I am as good at remembering grudges as you are, Sunless, so pray that we never meet again. He stopped near the very edge of the empty abyss of the sky below, lingered at it for a few moments, and then said somberly. Although who will hear your prayers? The gods are dead. With that, the Prince of Nothing stepped into the darkness and disappeared, taking his reflection with him. Sunny was left alone on the empty island, struggling to believe that he actually survived. He looked down, at his exquisite wooden chair, then at the rock in his hand. Then, he let out a shaky breath. Damn! I can't believe that worked.